Gold Show. I'm your host, Larry Leaks. Today we're continuing our series, I Know You Know, a review of Psych. This week we wrap it up with our review of Season 8. But first, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Poddex, for sponsoring this episode. Check them out today at poddex.com. Use the promo code Larry21 for 10% off your purchase. But before we get into our review, we gotta set the mood.
Telling the truth, I know, you know, they just don't have any proof. It's the deception, learn how to bend your worst inhibitions, then psych you out in the end.
And now onto our review of Psych Season 8, the grand finale. The good, well, it ends well. The bad, mediocre use of actors, lackluster use of characters, terrible stories. The basics. The final 10 episodes of Psych are almost enough to ruin anyone's love of the comedy detective series. You know, a TV series has lost all of its spark when it takes multiple attempts to muster up the enthusiasm to get through the final episodes of the series. Sadly, that is where I fell with Psych. Psych had some decent seasons, became repetitive, and took a big and important narrative leap in the 7th season, which you can watch my review right up here. Unfortunately, the showrunners wrote themselves into a place from which they had no idea how to proceed, and the 8th season of Psych dropped like a particularly something on an otherwise good series. With only 10 episodes, the 8th and final season of Psych is a mashup of concept episodes that largely fail to land or add up to a cohesive story that does any justice to the characters established throughout the prior 7 seasons. Instead, the show's executive producers seem to have no idea how to keep the bulk of the characters engaged and part of the ongoing narrative, and they instead jettison most of the familiar characters, focus intensely on Sean and Gus, and hope viewers aren't actually watching the opening credits to notice how most of the cast is not in the episode. With the Santa Barbara Police Department in the hands of interim director Trout, Sean and Gus find themselves nearing bankruptcy from lack of use. The pair heads to the UK for PotterCon, where they become embroiled in an Interpol investigation that puts them once more in a scheme from Despero. Returning home, Sean tries his hand at becoming a motivational speaker. The show then remakes a first season episode with some new twists before Woody is taken hostage. After Gus investigates a murder of a man whose life is very similar to his own, the guy helps Lassiter solve a murder that will allow him to get appointed chief of police. Lassiter takes his new position as chief seriously, while at the same time becoming a father, and is forced to rely on Sean and Gus to solve the murder of a food truck owner. After Sean participates in a police consultant convention, Gus has nightmares that lead him to seek the counsel of a sleep therapist. The series climaxes with Sean deciding to pursue Juliet to San Francisco, even if it means leaving Gus behind. The final season of Psych is tight on Sean, Gus, Lassiter, and Woody. Woody the coroner gets more airtime than credited cast members who play Henry, Juliet, and Vic. Colt Fuller is hilarious when possible as Woody, but even is unable to save the bulk of the episodes. The reason for that is that the 8th season relies almost exclusively on gimmick episodes. Freestanding concept episodes that have a case that exists largely in an alternate reality. So for example, in 1967, The Psych Odyssey recast most of the characters that tell a story of a cold case that Lassiter needs Sean to crack in order to get his promotion. Remake, aka Cloudy with a Chance of Improvement, is a lampoon of remakes of well-established pop culture classic films, but it does not actually fit into the Psych timeline. The series wastes the penultimate episode with a confusing, dream-riddled episode that never firmly establishes a sense of reality to justify its end. Because the season is so plot-focused with gimmick episodes, there is no real character development until the series finale. The episodes do not add up to character growth for any of the main characters. They're reshuffled, moved around, but until the breakup, none of them really develop. The first half of the season is preoccupied with getting rid of interim Chief Trout, that there's no real catharsis to all the effort the guys go through to get rid of Trout. Vic returns for a blink before leaving, taking Juliet with her, and the few scenes that feature Corbin Burnson feel like contractually obligated use of actor, as opposed to any reflection of the performer's talent or organic use of the character. In fact, the final season of Psych is particularly a laughless season. While I loathed A Nightmare on Elm Street, or on State Street, it was the source of the season's only memorable moment of humor. When Gus is in his mother's house in a dream, he calls out for his father, and there is a picture of Martin Sheen on the mantle. Ultimately, the last season of Psych feels poorly tacked on, like there were contracts that needed paying and the USA Network decided not to take a total loss by paying them out without producing something. For the history of the season, it might have been better if the producers had ended on a very different note. And now we're going to dive into the top 10 episodes of Psych. As we all know, Psych ended 7 years ago, but its witty crime-solving remains as delightful as ever. Sean Spencer may be lying about having actual psychic powers, but thanks to an endless pop cultural knowledge, unstoppable charm, and his trusty friend Gus, he's still able to solve the wackiest murders in Santa Barbara. And now we dive into 10 of our favorite episodes that are worth revisiting. Number 10, and down the stretch comes Murder. Season 2 is Psych at its best, where later seasons relied on pop culture, homages, or serious character development to keep the juices flowing. Early episodes like this could pop off from the simplest ideas. Solving a murder in a racetrack brings Sean and Gus face to face with a childhood bully, requiring them to figure out an unsolved mystery from their childhood. At the same time, they're untangling delightful racing drama. Also, Sean gets ample chances to roast his dad for wearing a too colorful shirt at the track. Wow, Dad, tell me you're wearing that shirt because someone has to spot you from space. Number 9, the greatest adventure in the history of basic cable. Sean, Gus, and the search for buried treasure are a match made in, well, what's Santa Barbara's version of heaven? Red Robin? When Sean's adventuresome Uncle Jack returns to town to ask for his help in finding a pirate's gold, the guys are pulled into a high-stakes scavenger hunt. They're interrogated, tied up in a cabin, and nearly killed. And Gus loses a shoe. It's a rollicking hour that helps explain where our fake psychic inherited his rebellious streak. And when the experience winds up poking holes in his hero worship of his uncle, Sean gets the last word as only he can. Number 8, Last Night Gus. In this hilarious spoof of The Hangover, Sean, Gus, Lassiter, and Woody wake up after a night of partying with no memory of what happened the night before, because someone spiked their drinks. Did they kill someone? Definitely maybe. The boys, because let's be real, that's where they are, race against the clock to figure out what happened, and hopefully prove they aren't murderers. Sean and Gus are funny messes when they solve crime sober, so needless to say, watching them investigate a case hopelessly hungover is even funnier. Sean's frustrated monologue about his super memory failing him kills me every time I watch this episode. Number 7, Extradition, British Columbia. There's no such thing as the perfect crime, but there may be a thing as the perfect foil for Sean Spencer. International art thief Pierre Despereaux is so irresistibly charming it's hard to root against him, and he's clever enough to keep the guys on their toes. When Sean and Gus spot the criminal on a ski trip in British Columbia, it kicks off a cat-and-mouse game that spans multiple episodes, all delightful, but we've given the edge to Despereaux's debut for the sheer Canadian fun of it all. Psych, which was set in California but filmed in Vancouver, finally got to put on a coat. And number 6, here's Lassie. As you will see, there are several extended homages on this list. Psych was adept not only at constantly dropping pop culture references in its dialogue, but also making those references real with episode-length tributes. Best of all, the show never let such homages get in the way of its own storytelling. This episode, for instance, makes several visual references to The Shining after Lassie moves into a possibly haunted condo, but also tells its own story using the eccentric neighbors without relying too much on what exactly happened at the Overlook Hotel. Number 5, Scary Sherry. Bianca's Toast. An ambitious send-up of sorority slasher films, the season 1 finale was the series' first great episode and made it clear the show wasn't going to be your typical Case of the Week series. Directed by John Landis and co-written by Roday and Franks, Scary Sherry is the first time we see many of the show's recurring bits. Sean and Gus running away screaming from a crime scene, people confusing Gus for Bud on The Cosby Show, and Juliet getting lost in an undercover role. Number 4, Dual Spires. In a September interview with EW, Steve Franks said he wanted every episode to be wish fulfillment for the writer. It's because of that rule that we got this moody and slavishly detailed homage to Twin Peaks, co-written by Roday, who was a Twin Peaks superfan. While the hour is filled with too many Lynchian references to count, and guest appearances from the Twin Peaks cast, you can still enjoy the episode if you aren't familiar with the 90s series. As the show would prove time and time again, there's nothing better than simply watching the writers and cast have fun with the things they love. And before we get into our final 3, let us know in the comments section below what's your favorite episode, what was your favorite season, are you a super fan of the show? Leave it all in the comments below. So number 3, 100 Clues. In a way, it wasn't Psych always doing a Clue homage. For its 100th episode, the show went all in on the 80s cult classic that already shares its sense of humor. From its love of wordplay and loud screaming to that one guy who just can't help but run around a mansion while solving a murder. 100 Clues brings together 3 Clue alums, Leslie Ann Warren, Martin Mull, and Christopher Lloyd, for a dark, posh affair that riffs on the original movie. From its score to its multiple endings, without just remaking it, we bring a +1, +1, +2, +1 to this party any day. And number 2, An Evening with Mr. Yang. Mr. Yin presents Yang 3 in 2D. Psych was so delightful mostly because of its low stakes. Sean and Gus' witty repartee was never offset by more than 1 or 2 deaths to people per episode. But 3 different times over the course of several seasons, things got real. Sean got actual arch enemies, and they threatened the people closest to him, because Psych saved such stakes for when it mattered. These episodes felt huge. Their particular highlight was the second act, an ode to Hitchcock films that had a lasting impact on Sean and Jules. But all 3 together tell the full saga. And finally, number 1, American Duos. The second season premiere remains the best example of everything that made fans go, well, psycho. Written by Roday and Franks, directed by Landis, this American Idol spoof sees Sean and Gus go undercover at a singing competition in order to protect a Simon Cowell-esque judge, Nigel St. Nigel, played by Tim Curry. Basically, it has everything that makes a great episode. Sharp pop culture commentary, ridiculous hijinks, like Juliet going into hard-ass choreographer mode in order to teach the guys how to dance, and of course, music. The absurd Tears for Fears, Michael Jackson showstopper that concludes the episode is pure gold and more than confirmed that this series refused to be tamed. Thank you so much for watching and listening to the Cinema Gold Show. That's all we have for this episode. Let us know in the comment section below what you thought about this episode. Any ideas for future TV series we should review? If you want to support the show, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/cinemagold. Or you can donate to our GoFundMe page. Link will be in the description. Thanks for watching. See you next time.